welcome back to the Inscape. My name is Tanya.
My name's Tayan.
We're super excited to be here and talking about one of my favorite movies. I'll never forget the first time I watched this movie. I would.
Where was the first time you watched it?
I want to say it was like 20 years ago. I don't know how long. How long has it been out?
You gotta.
I don't even know.
Probably.
Long time.
I think it's 2011. I don't know. Maybe later. 2012.
So, I watched this movie. I had not even started my journey.
Did you see it in theaters?
Saw it in theaters.
Okay, I don't think I knew that.
And all I know is something happened. Something shifted for me. I remember feeling just mind blown. And I
think the rest of the world.
Yeah. And I didn't know why. I really didn't. I just remember trying to form ideas and awarenesses that started coming, but I had no idea what was even happening.
Well, the funny thing is, I remember the first time I saw it. I did not see it in theaters, which now I'm jealous. I didn't know you actually did.
Yeah.
But oh, actually, I have now. I saw it for the reunion.
Yeah.
I forgot. Not the reunion, the comeback, whatever screening. But I think when I saw it, the initial, I don't know if I felt it consciously, but on some level, it's like the layers that are in this film aren't going to be apparent for years. Like what was actually said. Like, it's good point. I just think it's funny that we're talking about it still, 20 years later almost, to the same degree of importance and just discovering new things about it. And you should probably say what movie we're talking about.
Yeah, we probably should. The movie's Inception. And I know for you, it's a special movie just because your mentor and a huge inspiration for you is Christopher Nolan.
Oh my gosh.
I mean,
he should be everybody's, but yes.
And I mean, I'm not convinced that he is not from this lifetime. I'm not sure, what he really is.
And well, Oppenheimer's coming out. Have you seen any of the stuff on that?
No.
Well, I think he might be exploring those possibilities.
Oh, good.
Coming up.
Good. I think
he's Tenet follow-up.
He's gonna unveil that he's not from this planet.
Or that the atoms align to make something about the creation of the atomic bomb, which should be interesting.
I can't wait. So Christopher Nolan's film Inception, and the incredible amount of visuals, and it was the first time that my mind, right, my consciousness, my awareness was able to put a picture in a story form that displayed so much depth of what our subconscious does, what our worlds really could look like. I think he did such a fabulous job of breaking down beliefs and ideas, what happens inside of our brain. But more than that, I think what it did was it tapped into a visual of what happens in our Inscape, what is really going on. I ask my clients when I first meet them, I ask them a question. There's two questions I ask. One is, do you believe that we create our own worlds? That's the first question I ask. It's a qualifying and a disqualifying question that I ask every client. And it brings up so many things for people, right? There's layers to even that question. This movie does such a fabulous job of understanding that we are in Cobb's world, Leonardo DiCaprio's world, the entire time, and what that means.
Yeah.
What it means to
full
be in
spoilers for this movie, just as a disclaimer.
That's
but
true.
Yes,
that's true.
I don't think there's
it's been out 20 years.
It's been out 20 years, but still, I think the thing that it does in leaps and bounds in what art is, which is, such a way to communicate the Inscape. The artist industry is the way that we then bring that into reality, and it is the merging point of those two worlds. And I think Inception is the piece of art that in the past, I don't even know, probably an entire 50 years of filmmaking that has ever even touched that point in a way that it has, and that is through both visual and narrative storytelling, which is crazy. Like you're saying, it is a visual of what that space looks like, and that's crazy. Yeah, that's a feat in and of itself.
Well, I love that you bring the art of that up, because capturing the Inscape in our conscious mind and in the the actual experience, right? It's a feeling, it's a space within us. It's the universe inside of us that is also projected outside. And so the art of being able to see that expression of what the Inscape is it comes in many forms. And so that's why I wanted to bring up the visual of this movie and the narrative. Like you said, the art form that the Inscape is projected onto is so amazing.
Well, I mean, we open the movie, which the opening scene of this film, I think, really does a fantastic job. And if you've read the Inscape book, I think you could pull some pretty intentional inspiration from there. But it starts with our protagonist. He washes up on the shore of a beach, and that's sort of the opening tone that sets the whole thing. And I think a big thing that we discuss in Inscape is the idea of landscape.
Yes.
Because Inscape as a word actually is, as we created it so many years ago now, wow, that's crazy, is inner landscape.
Yes.
And so the landscape of the beach and like this whole setting as we open sort of sets that tone. And I think cinema and film in general does do that, but this Inception's goal is to bring you into the dream world, and that's what happens. Is Leonardo DiCaprio's character walks into the office of an old man and repeats a line to him that he remembers from his past life, or in this case his in reality. And that sort of sets the tone and the idea of what we're going to be exploring in this film. And the important thing to realize, I think, with the scene is this is our intro into the dream world, and in many ways this is exactly how we intro into the Inscape. And so in that way it's a perfect visualization.
I love that you bring up the landscape of that, because if we're going to watch this and really allow ourselves to feel what the Inscape is, you're right, it is such a perfect scene. Because even as you were saying that, I think the practice of the Inscape and really understanding it was, you realize that in the beginning scene it's also the ending scene, right? And it's such a cool conversation of time that we're not going to get into, I'm sure, but it's the scene of he's already been on the journey and he's meeting the old man again, and the feeling is what I wanted to address. Because the Inscape, like we talk about, that landscape of getting washed up onto the beach, we know by the end of the movie that he's been on a hell of a journey,
right?
and that washing up feeling of like I've arrived here is what comes up for me. And like how many times we feel like we've been in the ocean of life, and then just that that feeling of like arrival when we get washed up onto the beach. Like there's an experience to that,
right? And I think that's exactly what and to go into another part of it is the symbolism within these spaces, and movies do create the idea of an Inscape within themselves. They have a world unto themselves. There's an order to things, a way of things, and I think Inception is such a fantastic example of that, because the dreamscape in this scene, Leonardo DiCaprio, the protagonist of the story, is in what they call limbo. He's in this part of the dream world that's deeper layers than any other part, which in the film just represents deeper layers of the subconscious.
Exactly.
So he's very far into himself.
Yes.
And the oceans of light, all those things, those do show up as literal oceans and things within this dream world, because while they're and of course the question of reality can be debated, as this movie has done for as long as it's been out.
Yep.
The question has been, does the top fall at the end or not?
Yes.
And what is reality? And I think the nature of reality is what it questions, but the symbolism pulling in from the world, such as an ocean and such as the beach and such as these elements, pulling that into the narrative world in order to demonstrate that, is exactly what Inception shows so well. And that is a big part of Inscape, is noticing those exact symbols, exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. So understanding that the dream world, and I love that you bring up, we might as well just hit it right now, and that is, the symbol of what is reality. And I think it's an amazing topic to talk about, because you're just in your dream world and you're not in reality is kind of a common phrase that a lot of people,
super common phrase. And I think this movie challenges that idea, because the things they do, and the scene that's coming to me is there's a scene where Cobb's wife She, in the very beginning, he meets her in exactly, because after the opening scene, we switch then to the exact same office that they're in, and now it's a different time period, and it's within the dream world still that we're switching, but we're switched to a different time and a different space, and but it takes place in the same area, and this heist ensues, and you start learning that Leonardo DiCaprio's character's goal is to retrieve inspiration from Sato, which is the older man from the beginning scene, but now he's young, and so there's this interaction, and now you have a scene where Cobb's wife comes in and she shoots his partner, and he says, well, it doesn't matter if you're gonna shoot him, because if you die, we just wake up. And she says, yeah, but pain is in the mind. And I think that's a big theme that ends up playing out, not even just with pain, but with different elements in the film, that reality does interact so closely with this world.
Oh, good point.
That there is such an overlap.
Yeah.
Because what's real and what's not real is a very big question. And I think that's the reason I love this as an example, because it does start to show why the practice of what we're doing here is so important.
Yeah.
Because what's real and what's not real is a real question. Because
and I like that we're just going to hit it right out of the gate, because as a brand and as a practice, as an experience that we're having, not just within ourselves, but in our family and in my business, and it is very interesting and triggering for the mind to start to obviously question reality and what is reality. But how many times in our life do we realize that we create our own worlds is a very individual thing? Yes, it's collectively, there is a collective world, but individually we all have our own reality, and how that shows up in our life and in our relationships is an extremely valuable piece to what I teach people when I'm working with individuals or in relationships, and recognizing that your reality and your Inscape and your world, everything that you're feeling inside of yourself, everything, all the spaces that you go to, all the experiences, the narrative that's in your mind, all of those put together creates a experience. It creates a reality, it creates a world within us. And I don't think that people recognize that isn't the reality. Right. That isn't the universal reality, that if my reality bumps up into your reality, that there are edges to that, and respecting and understanding that my reality isn't your reality allows for so much curiosity and connection to happen. But when we project that my reality is your reality, there's so many assumptions and so much disconnect that comes into play, because we don't allow for curiosity in both worlds and both realities. And so it's so relevant. The conversation of what is reality is so relevant because we don't understand that we're operating from our own reality, our own dreamscape. And that's what's so important about this movie, because we are in Cobb's reality the entire time. And then when we insert all these other characters, we don't recognize consciously that we're not in all these other characters' realities. It is still Cobb and Leonardo DiCaprio's character that we're in his world the entire time.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, and the question of what is reality brings up the question of what is Inscape, because Inscape is this idea of a narrative world within your mind, within your soul, really, that is a representation of all of those things.
Well, and I love that you're talking about, it's the narrative is just one piece, right? The stories that we tell in our mind, but
the
also
visuals, and then and the elements of reality, the emotion and the energy and all those things. It's just the question of what is Inscape is the idea of separating our notion of reality and realizing that there is more to our existence.
Yes.
And I think that's the biggest thing that Inception, why it blew everybody's mind. I mean, The Matrix did the same thing when it came out. Like, the idea that we are not just here. There's also more to here. Yes. There's different dimensions of that reality. And Inception is illustrated through dreams. In The Matrix, it's illustrated through, an actual program. But the idea remains that there is more to existence than just what you see with your physical eyes, and that then translates into, you know, imagination and creation and curiosity and all those things you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because that is, all of those elements are what make up the Inscape, which is as illustrated in Inception when Leonardo DiCaprio's character talks about finding an architect and finding somebody that can build the dreamscape. And it's like, that's exactly what we're talking about here. The idea that you can build a world within yourself and outside of yourself, and that world you build inside yourself affects the world outside yourself, and that there's a really strong correlation between subconscious mind and conscious mind and reality. Because I think another thing Inception that it does so brilliantly is the idea that you can consciously create within the subconscious.
Yeah.
And that gives you complete control over creating your world. And once you give that back to people, it's like, okay, now we're playing a new game.
Well, I love bringing that up as well, because when you say create in that reality, that is the purpose and driving force to Inscape, is the awareness and the understanding that you can create in this space. You can create a world. You can actually live the experience that you want to experience. But I think the thing that this movie also does so well is there is a lot that happens that I would assume that Christopher Nolan knows is not being created consciously, obviously, right? That's the point.
So much,
right? You know, the scene that I'm thinking of and that I use all the time, I use this as a visual for even couples that I work with. And so many times couples will come in and they'll say to me, our relationship, they'll judge the relationship, or they'll label the relationship as we're doing really good, or we're not doing so good, based off of fighting, right? They'll say, we've been fighting a lot, or we don't fight at all, and that will be the indicator of whether the relationship's good or bad. And it's super fascinating because obviously having conversations and heated conversations and having things come up in the reflection of relationships, especially intimate relationships, is such a huge part of our own our own Inscape.
It so is. And even because I think people they really distort the idea of that. I know for me, it was in my relationship, it's fighting was such a thing that we just didn't even know how to do forever. And it was I don't even know where to start, because it's when you're so much in somebody else's world, as is demonstrated in the film when they're I think the scene I'm thinking of is they're talking at a coffee shop at one point, and Leonardo DiCaprio tells his architect that, you're dreaming, and this is actually, a world that we built. It's not actually the one you're living in. There's a difference in being in somebody else's space. Yes. And it's and when you're doing that, you don't even know how to, but it's once you do figure out that aspect of communication, when you don't have that kind of passionate not clashing of worlds, but interaction between worlds, that's when I think personally I feel the most disconnected. It's
so true.
There's not if it's just been good and I don't think I've been near your world at all. And I'm not really in mine. I'm not occupying mine the same way. I think that's the beautiful thing about intimate relationships, is you can have them as such a perfect mirror for that.
I totally agree. And you bring up the most perfect scene for that, because what happens when she's in his space is she starts to feel powerful, right? And so she starts to realize she can move things around, and she starts to do things in his space. And he says to her, don't forget, you're also in my world, right? So everything you're seeing here is a subject of my projections. These are all my projections. And so when she starts moving things around, which is such a good visual for when I go into your world or into my relationship and start to speak for the other person, or assume things about the other person, or I go into their world and I start to move things around like it's my space, right? It feels very controlling when that happens. And what happens is literally he shows that in Leonardo DiCaprio's all those projections start to look at her and they start to feel defensive, and he says be careful, because they're going to start to feel defensive. And that's what happens in relationships, especially our intimate relationship, is we start to build up our walls and our defenses, and we notice that somebody else is in our space, and we don't like that they think that they can create in that world,
Right.
because it's our world, it's our space.
Which is why understanding and being able to see the inner landscape and developing a vocabulary around the Inscape,
Yes.
and being able to define the subconscious space like Inception does so beautifully,
Yes.
is so important, because then you can actually take that and realize what's happening, because otherwise
Yes.
it just feels scary. Or
Yeah.
like you have the idea of a controlling relationship or things like that, and it's like you don't really know what's happening.
Yes.
And in that, there is a loss of power. There's a loss of knowledge and understanding of your own world. And when you really just come to know your Inscape and your inner landscape and what that subconscious is, you recognize when somebody's in it
Yes.
that is trying to move things around that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Or that there is an intrusion in it, or a taking of energy. And you realize when you are doing the same thing, because you know your world so well, you can tap into when you're not in it. And that's why, as a tool in relationships, but in so many aspects of life, it's so essential to know that space. And that's what Inscape does, obviously, but also Inception paints the picture so that you have an idea of what that space is.
Yes.
So you can begin to learn it, because you otherwise the lights are just off. You're not really learning a space the same way.
Good point. And I also want to bring up the scene when I talk about fighting, right? I brought up the intensity of when we are trying to communicate. And I love that you talk about the, even having the idea, the visual, but also the verbiage to know what's happening, right? But the feeling of when someone's in your space is also extremely valuable, because it's like, I can feel my defenses coming up. I can feel the resistance happening. I can feel those projections starting to like turn and look. It's all those defenses that come up. But the scene that I want to talk about, that I use so much, is when, I can't remember, they're getting ready to dive into Inception itself, and he looks over at one of his teammates, and you'll probably know better the names, but he looks over and he says, "You didn't do your homework. You didn't even realize that in this guy's programming, he has a military background," right? And this is such a good metaphor and an idea for understanding that everybody has a background. Everybody has, things in their DNA. Everybody has things generationally. Everybody has what he's showing is a military background, which says when things get heated and my defenses go up really high, machine guns might come out. Things might happen that I don't even realize subconsciously is in my background. Or when I'm relating to somebody else, what happens is we make that personal. We make that their reality our reality. And the amazing part about that scene is it was just the one man's subconscious, the one man's reality, and it was his defenses coming for them. And yes, can those be damaging? It's like yeah, they were worried about actually getting killed,
right
because, and that can happen, right? That actually happens in a very real experience. Things happen when we hit those massive triggers in people's worlds. So I love this for a relationship movie, even in itself, relationship to ourselves, understanding the space, but also recognizing that everybody has that space.
Yep, 100%. And I think that is what's so great about it. I'm really excited to do more deep dives on this movie, because we really need to break it down. I mean, scene by scene in the future.
Let's do it, because this, I mean, it's such a fabulous movie, and it does such a great job of showing so much of what we're saying when it comes to the Inscape, and being able to dive deeper and deeper into our worlds, into our space, that we create our own worlds. That's the first qualifying question I ask anybody. How does it make you feel to really understand or think about the concept of we create our own worlds? And then you touched on the next one, which is what comes up for you when I say we are more than what we see.
Yeah.
And those two questions are questions that I think I would invite anybody that is even thinking about diving into being a powerful creator in their world to really think about, because we create our own world is not just on the surface of accountability, and you know, there's some basic things, but it's far deeper, far bigger than we even can imagine, and we are more than what we can see. I think this movie does such a fabulous job of showing the layers and layers of what is within us.
Yep, it is the foundation of what the Inscape curriculum is, which I think is why it's such a fantastic such a fantastic introduction into what that is.
Yeah, I agree. It won't be the last time we talk about Inception.
No.
Or anything Christopher Nolan, for that matter.
No, absolutely not.